It is January, no, it is February 2nd, Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil just saw his shadow, so we have 6 more weeks of winter here in 2025. And now you're caught up. Today we're going to look at World War I. And this is a big one, guys. In fact, we're going to do this in 2 different videos. So, here we go. World War I. The descent into the abyss. Alright, so here's the short version. World War I changed everything. And it changed everything, right? So, because of the nature of how everything was going up to this point, all the individual countries and all their little imperialism, all the little land grabs and all that kind of stuff that we've been talking about for the past several months. Yeah, it's all going to come to a head here. All right, you ready? Let's go ahead and do this now. It's all going to come to a head here, and we're going to call this the war that will end all wars. Actually, that's what they really did call it, the war to end all wars. Because see, if they had actually called it World War I while they were fighting World War I, then the implication, right, is that there's going to be another war. And they didn't know there was going to be another war, so they called it the war to end all wars, or the Great War. That's what they called it also. Okay, and so then this war is going to weaken and or shatter, well, basically the world and all of its different. Wow. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get into it, right? So what's going on? So we have 2 groups. I would say the good guys and the bad guys, but we can't say good guys and bad guys yet, because you know the World War I, the United States didn't get into it until the very, very last little bit, and so we have side A and side B here, and so we have the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente, and so here's the short version. In orange, right? There in Germany, we have the Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he's pretty aggressive. Germany has a big industrial base, lots of materials, lots of ore, lots of coal, and they can build factories like nobody's business. And he's going to want to expand, and he's going to ramp up his military, Wilhelm II. All right, so then everybody else is kind of watching that. So let's look at the Triple Entente first. The Entente is in the green, and I guess we would consider them the good guys because that's the group that the United States joined at the very end. So in green, we have the Russians. Yep, that's what I said. The Russians, the good guys. The Russians, the French, and the British. And we're going to ignore Italy for a second here. So what's going on? Russia needs France and Britain to trade with. France needs Russia because if Germany starts getting all crazy, France is going to need somebody on the other side. And Britain was kind of in charge of Belgium at the time. So we've got these three countries all kind of working together, the green countries. And we have the orange countries there, and we have Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and then the Ottoman Empire. So Germany, Austria, and Turkey. And then we have Italy. And Italy. So Italy is going to be on the orange team. they're going to be on the alliance side, and then after a year or so they're going to switch sides and join the green team. So this particular map has them on the Entente side. Okay, so what are we doing? I think that's all we're going to say about that. Okay, so what's going on here? All right, here's the short version, guys. The bigger the country, the bigger the country, right? And these countries in in Europe have been expanding and expanding and expanding, and now they're pretty much done. I mean, where else are you going to expand? They've done Africa. They've done South America. they've done Australia, they've done the little bitty islands. I mean, there's pretty much nowhere else to expand. So if you do expand, you are now officially expanding onto somebody else's territory. And that's going to cause some problems here. And so one of the catalysts is France wants to expand into Morocco, which Germany is claiming. And so that's going to be kind of one of the very first catalysts here. But a lot more stuff's going to go on. Let's see. The word you're looking for is jingoism. Jingoism. So jingoism is I am so proud of my country that that's jingoism. That your country is the country. It's jingoism. People from Europe, when they come over here to the United States, there's comments about, man, they fly the flag over here in the United States everywhere. There's U.S. flags everywhere. Yeah, we do, especially in the South. We do fly the United States flags. You know, like they don't fly. The French don't fly French flags, and the British don't. I mean, the Italians don't fly Italian flags. You know, in my trips over to Europe, I don't remember seeing a lot of flags. But, you know, you drive down through the car places, you know, in Edmond, Oklahoma, and there's the flags that are, right. And then the particular state that I'm currently in, not only do they have a whole bunch of U.S. flags, but they have a whole bunch of that particular state's flags everywhere. Jingoism, your country is #1. Well, that's great. You can believe in jingoism, but here's the deal: if everybody is jingoist, somebody's going to be disappointed. Not everybody can be #1. So, how do you establish #1? You have more guns. So here's an arms race. An arms race. Oh, arms race. Germany is going to start stockpiling guns, and they're going to start building really, really large cannons. And the rest of the world's going to look at that and say, I wonder what's going on over there in Germany. And then Germany's going to start taking their troops, and they're going to start marching around, and they're going to start practicing stuff, and everybody's going to be like, Germany, what's going on, Germany? Now you might think that it's the military. It's the military that wants to go to war, right? Well, there are other groups. There are other groups who are looking at it and they're thinking to themselves, you know, war can be pretty profitable. So, in a lot of different ways. So there are various companies in all of the countries, including the United States, but in all the countries, and they look at war and think, well, check this out. Are you a businessman and you're being challenged by your workers because they want raises and they want health care? What to do? Are you a government and you need distraction to keep people's minds off their rumbling tummies and their poor living conditions? Do you need a distraction? Hey, do you have a whole bunch of poor people in your country and you need them to get some jobs? Businesses, do you need new markets to go out and sell your goods to? Have we got a deal for you? Just have your government declare a war. See how that works? Ugh. All right, so the Balkans. Talking about this area right here, just north of Greece, that area right there. Call that the powder keg of Europe, because there's going to be a whole bunch of crazy stuff that goes down, has gone down, is going down, went down, may go down there in that area. So we're talking about Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, that group right there of countries. All right, well, it's ethically diverse, religiously diverse, culturally diverse. So that's why there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on. Franz Ferdinand, Archduke, heir to the Austria-Roman Empire, and his wife, decide they're going to go visit Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia, which had just recently been acquired the year before in a treaty with Austria-Hungary. A whole bunch of Bosnians were not very happy about that. Bosnian Serbs. There was an assassination group called the Black Hand. Yep, a group of them. Almost all of them under the age of 20. And they decided that they were going to take matters in their own hand. They were going to assassinate the Archduke. The Archduke, this is 1914. They have cars, and they're riding in a convertible. He and his wife are riding in a convertible. There is a motorcade, and there are 6 assassins. So the motorcade, the plan for the motorcade is like put out in the newspapers, and everybody knows exactly where the motorcade's going to be, right? So the 6 assassins, they all line up on the street down the road. As the motorcade goes by, the first car, the second car, here comes the third car where the Archduke is. The first assassin, he has a pistol, and he has a bomb, so like a hand grenade, and so he's going to throw the bomb, and then he just doesn't. The second assassin, who's actually very close, has a bomb and a pistol, and he's about to throw the bomb or shoot the gun, and he doesn't. The third guy, he has a bomb, and he does throw it. He throws the bomb, but the timer wasn't right, and so the bomb hit the Archduke's car, bounced off the car, hit the street, and the next car behind the Archduke, when it rolled over the bomb went off, which injured 16 to 20 people. Okay. Because there's a bomb that went off, then the first 3 cars in the motorcade, they took off. They accelerated super fast. So the next 3 assassins weren't ready for that. They were just expecting regular parade speed, and they weren't ready for that, so the Archduke, he got away. So he and his wife and the governor, they show up, they're making this big speech at the school, and basically the Archduke's like, so your country, you're full of assassins, what's going on? But everybody kind of calms down, and they said, all right, well, after the big speech, all right, we're going to get you back to your residence. And the Archduke says, no, here's what I want to do. I want to go to the hospital and check in on all those people that were hurt. So they make a quick outline, a quick plan of getting from point A to point B to the hospital. And there's a series of roads trying to get from point A to point B. The drivers of the motorcade were not all on the same page. So the first car, there he goes, and here comes the second car, and then the third car, the one that actually has the governor and the Archduke and his wife, I guess that'd make her the Archduchess, and they're there in the convertible, and they, excuse me, they get turned around. And so they're going to start turning to the left, and then the governor yells to the driver, hey, you, no, we're supposed to go to the right. And so then the driver, he stops the car, and he's shifting the shifter, and the car dies or idles, or it's something weird, but basically the car stops. And right there on the street corner, where the car stopped, is Gavrilo Princip. He's a 19-year-old student, one of the assassins. And he literally is just standing there on the street corner, totally in the wrong spot. And there's his targets, who just right there in a convertible. And from 5 feet away, he takes out his gun and he shoots the Archduke in the neck, and then his second bullet hits the Archduchess in the stomach, and then they drive away. So he killed both. He was then tackled because he was going to shoot again. He was tackled by the crowd. The assassin later said, "I wasn't aiming for the wife, I was aiming for the governor. Sorry that I killed her." And then Archduke dies. Shot in the neck, he dies. All right. This is the catalyst that really kind of kicks off the war. We have some correspondence, some letters between Wilhelm II and Nicholas II. Wilhelm from Germany, Nicholas from Russia. They are cousins. There's a whole bunch of people who are all kind of related here. In fact, like the wife of the Tsar, her grandmother is Queen Victoria of England. It doesn't matter. They're all related. So they're writing back and forth. And here we have Nicholas II. And he writes this letter to his cousin, and he says, "I foresee that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me and be forced to take extreme measures which will lead to war. To try and avoid such a calamity as a European war, I beg you in the name of our old friendship to do what you can to stop your allies from going too far." Okay, here's what he's talking about. All the orange countries and all the green countries, they have within their own countries there, they've all kind of said, "No, I've got your back. No, I've got your back. No, I've got your back. If you go to war, if somebody declares war on you, I'll help you out, and." And so here's Nicholas from Russia telling the guy on the other side, "Don't pull the trigger." And then we have William's response there at the bottom, and he says this: "Immediate, affirmative, clear, and unmistakable answer from your government is the only way to avoid endless misery. Until I have received this answer, alas, I am unable to discuss the subject of your telegram. As a matter of fact, I must request you to immediately order your troops on no account to commit the slightest act of trespassing over our frontiers." So both of these guys are saying, don't. Here we have the little guy at the front, and that's Serbia. And so here's Austria. So Serbia says, "If you touch me, I'll," and then Austria grabs Serbia, says, "If you make a move, I'll." And then you have Russia, who's grabbing Austria. It says, "If you hit that little feller, I'll." And then you have Germany, who's grabbing Russia. It says, "If you strike my friend, I'll." And here's France and Britain. "If you hit him, oh there, if you chaps." And that's kind of what happened. It's kind of like one of those playground games. "Oh yeah? Well, my big brother's bigger than your big brother." "Oh yeah? Well, my dad's bigger than your dad." "Oh yeah? Well, my grandpa's bigger than your Right. That's kind of what's going on here. And that's how we got into the war. War is inevitable. You know, people looked around and they were like, "You know what? We were going to ultimately, with everybody making treaties with everybody about who's going to go into war and who's got who's back, it's inevitable. It was going to happen. War could sort out the tension." That's an interesting quote. War could sort out the tension. Let's just go ahead and start swinging. Let's just go ahead and start hitting each other. And then after that, we'll all be calm after that. Just start smacking each other around. And then it'll get out of our system. That's an interesting idea. Mobilization is war. Is mobilization war? Mobilization, moving troops from point A to point B, but still within your country. Is that war? Interesting. So Germany has this interesting idea. It's called the Schlieffen plan. Wow. It's actually a pretty smart plan. Germany realizes that they have France on this side, Russia on this side, and so they're not going to be able to fight both sides very well. So what do? You knock out one really fast, and then you go for the other one. And so Germany looked at the map and said, all right, this is pretty obvious. Germany in the center, if they can smack France, like bam, one hit and knock France out TKO, then they can turn around and come towards Russia, because it's going to take Russia a long time to get themselves organized, because you think about how big Russia is to finally get there. So Germany says, let's knock out France quick. To do that, Germany has to go through Belgium. Have to go through Belgium. There's the Alps, but Belgium's easy. You go through Belgium. Well, here's the problem with that. If you go into Belgium, Britain and Belgium, oh, now you're going to bring Britain into this. And Germany's like, we're not worried about Britain. Britain's over there on that island, no big deal. But it was a big deal. So here we go. The actual war itself, right? Because Belgium actually played a little bit of defense. Germany wasn't actually expecting defense from Belgium, and so it slowed the Germans down. Because of that, France was able to really beef up its defenses. So France began to build trenches. And here we go, trench warfare. So they began to build the trenches. And trenches are 99.9% defense. So you build these lines, put people down in the trenches, and they stick their machine guns up above. We'll look at pictures in here in a second. And it's defense. If you're in a trench, it's hard to be on offense. When the Germans finally got to France, and they were like, wow, it's going to be hard to get past these trenches. So how do you defeat that? Well, you build your trenches. And so then the Germans built trenches. Sometimes they were within a football field, sometimes they were a mile away from each other, but there were some places, stories talk about how they were within like yelling distance, that they could actually talk to each other. Trench warfare, 99.9% defense. So both sides basically played not to lose. They didn't really play to win, they played not to lose. That's trench warfare, to play not to lose. Why is it so awful? Well, here's the deal. Machine guns and barbed wire and gas, chemical warfare, and artillery. This is all brand new stuff, basically, in war. And the offensive generals are still thinking what they were thinking about like 100 years before with Napoleon, where you line up a whole bunch of guys in straight lines and you charge. Well, if you have a whole bunch of guys in straight lines and you charge people with machine guns, that's not very smart. So defense, defense, defense. That's all this war was. Trench warfare was awful. Lice infested, rat infested, and. All right, so let's talk about it. So the bad guy is that direction, and they call that no man's land. So down there is a picture of no man's land, basically between the trenches, between trench A and trench B, for the good guys versus the bad guys, and then everybody's shooting at each other across this land. And you see that the forest was basically erased with all the machine gun fire. So we call that no man's land. If you were a human and you were caught in no man's land by the other side, yeah, it wasn't very good for you. Wasn't very good for you. So they build these trenches, and you see how deep they are there. There's a person there, and it's got to be deep enough that you can keep your head below the ground, because if your head sticks up above the ground, then the snipers on the other side are going to snipe you. So it looks sandbags and all sorts of stuff, and the barbed wire, etc., etc., etc. And then you see just complicated, very complicated. The different types of trenches, the different names for the different trenches. And you note that the trenches are not in straight lines, they are jagged. So I asked my students about that. why are the trenches jagged like that? Why are they not just in a straight line? And the more offensive-minded students, they say, well, it makes sense to make them jagged. Have you figured it out? Have you thought about it? It makes sense to make them jagged for defensive reasons. If you make them straight, like one straight trench, and the bad guy is somehow able to get across no man's land and drop down into the trench, and he has a machine gun, and the trench is just one straight hallway, that's not good for the people in the trench. But if you have jagged places in the trench where you have walls and you have corners, then machine gun bullets don't go around corners. See? Yeah. Awful. All right, so how deep were the trenches? Well, France is kind of interesting. The water table, earth science, nah, I won't. The water table in France is actually not that deep. So what they would do is they would dig these trenches down until you hit basically water, and then they would have to stop, because if you dig below the water level, the water's going to stay there, and so you don't want to be walking around in the water. So they would dig down to the point where the water level was about, and then they would put down, which means there's a lot of mud, right? They'd put down boards and things like that. Well, here's the deal: if you have 10 guys or 100 guys or 1,000 guys and they're walking through this mud, etc., 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 well, obviously that's going to compact everything, and the water levels, relatively, the water level rises a little bit from the mud getting compacted. All right, so people are walking around in this water. Plus, it's raining in France, and right? And so the water gets down in the trenches, and you think to yourself, okay, big deal. Walking around, you got boots on, big deal. Walking around in the water. No, that is a big deal. We call that trench foot. So you know how your mama tells you to take off your wet socks? That's because her mama told her to take off her wet socks. Because great-grandma told grandma, take off your wet socks. And great-great-grandma, and then, if I'm doing the math, great-great-great-grandma, who was there during World War I. Yeah. Great-great-great-grandma, who was there during World War I, she told her kids to take off their socks. Why? Because wet socks, not so good. You know you have wet socks. Oh, it's a yucky, icky feeling. But if you have wet socks that stay on your feet for long periods of time, here's the deal, guys. Your toes inside a boot, inside a reasonably warm and moist environment, fungus starts to grow. Like fungus, like mushroom, right? Fungus starts to grow on like athlete's feet. Hey, that literally is what that is. But this is not athlete's foot. This is trench foot. And if you have the same sock on, and that sock's been wet, and you've had it on for several days, maybe several weeks, things start growing on your feet, start eating your toes. We don't even want to talk about trench mouth. Constantly in the wet, constantly in the wet, constantly in the wet. Here's this doctor here, and he's going down the line, and he's looking at the soldiers' feet. And he's like, keep your feet dry. People would send gifts to the front lines, and they'd say, hey, here's some cookies, here's some cigarettes, here's some dry socks. And people were like, oh, dry socks. Man, the war was awful. And it gets worse. Chemical warfare. Chemical warfare is, well, it's currently in the year 2025. It's banned. It's banned by basically every country in the world has signed almost every country in the world has signed a treaty that says we will not use chemical warfare against people. And one, it's just nasty, but two, you can't direct it to a very specific person. It goes out and it kills indiscriminately, the good guys and the bad guys, and the women and the children and the old people and the orphans and the people in the hospitals, and so we do not use chemical warfare. But we didn't have that rule yet in World War I. Chemical warfare was used. So how does that work? Well, what you want to try to do is you want to get something that's caustic, some sort of acid, and you want to get it onto the other team. So how do you do that? Well, there are several different types of chemicals that they use, chemical gases that they use, including tear gas and chlorine gas and phosgene gas and mustard gases. Chlorine gas is probably the easiest one there. You make chlorine, Cl2, so you just get some chlorine gas and you put it in these giant barrels, right? And then you wait for the wind. You wait for the wind to be blowing the other direction across the field. You don't want it blowing towards you guys, you want it blowing towards those guys. And so when the wind is blowing the correct direction, you pour the chlorine out. It's a gas, you pour it out onto the field, and then the wind blows the gas, because chlorine is heavier than air, regular air, and so it goes across the field and then drops down into the trench on the other side. And here's where it gets yucky. So chlorine gas, yes, it's not breathable, but here's the yucky part. Chlorine gas mixed with H2O forms O2, which is just oxygen, and HCl, hydrogen chloride. Well, hydrogen chloride in its aqueous form, which would mean water-based, we call that hydrochloric acid. And so you think, oh, so wait, so if I have chlorine gas and I combine it with water, then I can get hydrochloric acid. Well, where are you going to get any water? Were you paying attention to the last slide? There's a whole bunch of water in the trenches. Wherever there's water and that chlorine gas hits that water, then that water is going to form pockets of hydrochloric acid. And some of you are thinking, chlorine, isn't that what they, swimming pools? Wait. So when my eyes start to burn, it's because actually that's true. Have you ever been in a pool, you smell a pool and it burns your nose because it's so much chlorine and you're thinking, ooh, that's a lot of chlorine, and it burns your nose? Well, why do they put chlorine in swimming pools? Well, because it kills things. It kills all the nasty, yucky bugs. It kills all the nasty germs. But then we jump into it. Right. But the chlorine we use in swimming pools, it doesn't turn the water into, it doesn't turn the water into a vat of swimming pool acid. No. It's just enough chlorine to kill the nasty little germs. But if you imagine like super heavy duty chlorine like what these guys are using, man, that can really get your attention pretty fast. Hey, let me tell you about the time that when I was 20 and I was a manager, an assistant manager at Wendy's, and we had a drug dealer in the bathroom, and he wouldn't come out. He locked himself in the bathroom and he wouldn't come out. And so one of my friends and I, we decided we were going to use chemical warfare, and we introduced some chlorine gas into the. Okay, two things. One, statute of limitations is long since passed, so I can talk about this. Two, he came out of the restroom and he was oh man, he was crying. Okay, what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is I may have violated the Geneva Convention. All right, the moral of the story is, this is yucky, this is nasty, this is arguably evil. It's so evil that even Adolf Hitler, who was a soldier during World War I, the stories talk about how he got a whiff of gas in his eye, and it burned his eye a little bit, and he was like, later he wrote in his diary, he said something to the fact of, wow, you should never, ever, ever, ever use gas on people. It is too evil. It's so evil you should never use gas on humans. I'm going to I'll let you think about that for a second. Hitler, not using gas. And now you say, wait, but didn't the Auschwitz and the Holocaust and the gas chambers? Right. Remember, he said he wouldn't use it on people. He wouldn't use it on humans. And his definition of humans was a little skewed from the rest of the reality. Okay. The Russians. The Russians, while the French and the Germans are beating each other up with gas and machine guns, etc., playing trench warfare, the Russians are finally starting to move. They're finally starting to get moving here. And here's the problem. The Russian army, the Russian military is just awful. It's awful. It's led by the aristocrats, which basically means that if you are rich, congratulations. Oh, you're rich. We're going to make you a general because you're rich. People had no idea what was going on. They would send the peasants who were the soldiers. They were illiterate, and so they couldn't even read the orders that they were given. They would call each other on telephones without using code words. They would send messages. They would send letters to each other without using codes. So the Germans could read the letters faster than the Russians could read their own letters. It was just awful. The Russian army, terrible, 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 terrible. At one point, the Tsar Nicholas II, he said, "You know what? I'm going to lead the army." So he left the White Palace there in St. Petersburg, and he went to lead the army against the Germans. All right. Interesting side story. We're going to ignore the guy in the bunny rabbit mask. That's a bunch of Russian soldiers. We're going to look at this guy here. Okay. Dr. Jones is not a big believer in demon possession, but if he was, that guy right there. So now that I have that hook, and you're like, let me tell you about that guy. His name is Grigory Rasputin. Grigory is a Russian monk. He grew up, in his early years, he was not religious, but then he joined the church, and then he quit the church, and then he joined a strange version of the church. And a lot of churches chose not to claim him, but Grigory was a very popular person. He was very charismatic. He'd go around in the early O's, the 1900s, in Russia, and very popular. In 1905, he got himself invited to a party with the Tsar, Tsar Nicholas II, and his wife, Alexandra. I want to think of her last name. Fyodorovo, something like that. Anyway, Alexandra, the Tsarina, they got invited, and the Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, he writes in his diary that night. He says, "I met a really interesting guy. His name is Grigory Rasputin. He's really kind of interesting." All right. So the Tsar and the Tsarina, they have 4 girls. And so they're going to try for a fifth child. Hopefully it's a boy, hopefully it's a boy, hopefully it's a boy, because that way there's an heir to the throne, right? And so sure enough, their fifth child, Alexei. And so he, when he's born, everybody's happy and everything, and everybody's cheering, and then they cut the cord. Like I'm actually talking about, like literally the cutting the umbilical cord, and what you know, the belly button thing. And okay, so you cut the cord, and the kid didn't stop bleeding from the cut for, golly, it was a long time, long time before he finally stopped bleeding. And so at that point, they all kind of knew, oh no, this kid has, well, at that point, the imperial disease, but it's called Christmas disease. Today we call it hemophilia B. Hemophilia B is if you get cut, your body doesn't have clotting agents as much as the normal people. So 1 in 40,000 people ish have this, and so if you get cut, you bleed and you bleed and you bleed, and if it's a big cut, it could be life-threatening. And so Alexei had this. So growing up, his mother and father, the king and queen of Russia, the Tsar and the Tsarina, they basically said, "Okay, kid, you don't get to run around run around and play soldier like everybody, all the other cool kids, and you don't get to play with sharp, knives, or you don't get to go play with anything that could hurt you." And in fact, they hired two sailors, two military guys, to basically guard Alexei from touching anything sharp. The plan was to do that for his entire life. But obviously, as a kid, things happen, they fall down. And so you think about, and he would get a bruise. We think about what a bruise is, right, guys? A bruise is just bleeding on the inside, right? A hematoma is what they call it. A hematoma is just bleeding on the inside, and you just see that through your skin. All right, well, if normal people get a bruise, it goes away in a couple of days. Alexei, you get a bruise, and it could be there for months, and that's not good. That's not good. And if it's a big bruise, it could be life-threatening. Well, here's the story about that. Rasputin, the mad monk, he's known for having healing powers. And so there's a situation where Alexei gets a little bruised back when he was young, I want to say 5 or 6, and he gets a bruise, and so the Tsar and the Tsarina, they contact Gregory Rasputin, and they say, "Hey, can you help? Can you help?" So Rasputin shows up, and he's like, "You know what? The kid's going to be fine," and he spits on the kid. And the next day, the bruise was gone, and everybody was like, "How did that happen? He spits on a kid and the bruise is gone the next day, and this kid bruises don't disappear like that." And so the next time the kid had a bruise, they called up Rasputin again. Rasputin comes up, spits on the kid. The next day, the bruise is gone. So the Tsarina basically hires Rasputin as personal doctor for the Tsarevich, the Alexei, the heir to the throne of Russia. Okay, let's get back to the war. The Tsar, Tsar Nicholas II, he decides he's going to lead from the front, so he leaves, and he puts his wife in charge. So we have Alexandra, and she's going to be in charge of Russia while he's gone. Rasputin basically moves into the palace, and he then starts making decisions. There's lots of rumors about he and the queen and all sorts of crazy stuff, but ultimately, using his charisma, he works himself into the family, and he starts making decisions for the Russian people. The nobles, they're not happy about that. The nobles who are not on the front lines. The nobles aren't very happy with that, and so the nobles decide that they're going to kill Rasputin. So they, in 1917, they decide, they say, hey Rasputin, we want to talk with you. So the story talks about how, and guys, there's so many different versions of his death. I'm going to give you the one that I like, but you can look at a whole bunch of different versions. The story goes like this. My story goes like this. A story goes like this. So Rasputin, he gets called out to back behind the White Palace. There's some hunting shacks and things like that, or out there by the river. And so you think about the snow and the trees and Russia, right? And so he goes out there to one of the nice hunting shacks, and there's a group of nobles out there, and like, hey Rasputin, let's have this big party. And so they're all talking about it. And Rasputin, of course, he's a big party guy. He's very charismatic, big party guy. And so the nobles are all there to kill him, kind of like a Ides of March kind of thing. And so they have poison. They've used cyanide, basically rat poison. They've taken rat poison and they've put them in these cakes and these cookies, and they start offering them to Rasputin. And Rasputin looks at them and they're like, I'm not really hungry. And they're like, no, they're really good. They're really good. So he's like, So he starts to eat one of the cookies, and they're like, but nothing happens yet. So they're like, oh, okay, well, I tell you what, would you like something to drink? And so he's like, oh yeah, of course, because he's a big drinker. So they start filling up his glasses, basically with this drink, say vodka, but they put rat poison in the vodka. I guess he can't taste it because Russian vodka. So he starts drinking. He drinks 3 of these things, and they're all looking at each other like, oh yeah, you know he did. So he gets up like on the table and he starts dancing, and they're like, oh yeah, you dance. You make sure that your blood keeps going around. Make sure you circulate that on. And he's dancing, and he's asking for more drinks. And you know what? Those cookies aren't that bad, and he's going to have another cookie. And everybody, all the nobles, are all kind of looking at each other like, shouldn't he be dead by now? Because that's a lot of rat poison. Well, he wasn't. So then they're all looking at each other like, well, what are we going to do? So one of the nobles, he takes a baseball bat, and he comes up back behind Rasputin, and he goes, whack! He knocks Rasputin down, smacks him on the head. Okay, Rasputin laying there on the ground. Okay, he did. And they're all like, whew, that was weird. I mean, the poison, it didn't affect him. That was weird. Okay, well, anyway. And then Rasputin, he sits back up and he goes, hey, why'd you guys hit me? Why'd you guys hit me on the head? That's weird. And they're like, so another one of the nobles, he pulls out this knife and he stabs Rasputin in the side. And Rasputin goes, ah, and falls down dead. And so, he did. And so they're like, wow, he was poisoned and he was hit on the head and now he's stabbed. We're good. But you know what? Let's just make sure, right? So they take his body, and they carry him outside, and there's a little bitty river out in the back. So they throw him into the river, and they watch his body sink, and yeah, all right, he did. All right, great. And they go back inside, and now they're celebrating, drinking the non-poisoned vodka and eating the non-poisoned cakes and cookies. And like 10 minutes later, knock, knock, knock on the door. They go to the door and they open it. And Rasputin, he's standing there, right? He's like, guys, what's wrong? What did I do? You hit me on the head and now you stabbed me. And you tried to drown me. Why are you, what's going on? And the guys are like, so another one of the nobles takes out his pistola and goes, pow, pow, pow. One right in the middle of the forehead. Rasputin, he falls down. He did. So they take his body. They go down to the river. They throw him in the river. They watch his body sink. They all go back into the house. They shut the door. And they don't drink anymore, and they're not eating anymore. And they're waiting for the knock on the door. Well, they wait all night, and there's no knock on the door. And then in the morning, they think to themselves, you know what? Maybe we should go get the body, because evidence, right? It's awkward. So they go out there, and they can't find the body. They can't find the body. There are, in the United States of America, in the 1980s, in the 1990s, there were people who saw Elvis. Oh, look, Elvis, he's alive. Because Elvis died in 1977-ish. And people were like, oh, I saw Elvis. No, Elvis is alive. Well, in Russia, people would see Rasputin. Oh, did you see Rasputin? Rasputin, he's there. I saw him walking in the trees. He's out back behind the... Right. It's one of those folk stories. All right, so they really did. They ultimately, they did find his body. It was several hours later. They did find his body, and it was under, let's say, 200 meters away, under some ice. They found him. The autopsy guy, the ME said, yeah, bullet to the head is what killed him. Or did it? Why are we talking about this? Anyway, the short version is that the Tsar is out front, leading the charge, and Russia is falling apart from the inside, and that's going to, from last week, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks are going to see all this happening, and they're going to do some terrible things to the Tsar and his wife and their children, including Alexei and Anastasia. That's later. Okay, back to the war. In general, it was awful, right? Troops on both sides faced incompetent leaders. Nobody kind of really knew what was going on. Everybody's playing defense. Nobody's playing offense. Nobody knows how to play offense. Nobody really knows what's going on. Many troops were fatalistic. You look at their diaries and they talk, if I die today, I die today. If I die tomorrow, I die tomorrow. If we win, great. If we lose, whatever. I'll go back to being a farmer. Many troops are fatalistic like that. Politicians, they're living in their ivory towers from hundreds or literally 1,000 miles away, and they're making decisions. Nobody knows they don't know what real life is. Soldiers are upset because they're getting these letters from their people back at the house, and the people back at the house are like, hey, well, why don't you do this? Well, why don't you do this? Well, if it were me, I would just stand up and just run across no man's land. I'd hold up a Captain American shield or something like that, because World War I, and the soldiers were like, hey, generals making decisions from way back behind the lines. The war was not well executed. Okay, to avoid dissatisfied workers, labor groups, strikes, protests, companies were taken over by many of the governments. Newspapers were censored because you didn't want the bad news out there. You wanted to tell people we're winning. In fact, propaganda is where you skew the news, right? The people of Germany, some of the people of Germany were so shocked during the Treaty of Versailles when they're like, "Yay, Treaty of Versailles, we won!" And wait, we what? We lost? Because the news was so jingoistic pro-German that the Germans didn't even know that they lost the war until they lost the war. All right. Here are some propaganda pieces. Wake up, America. The British were really good at their propaganda pieces because the British, part of what Britain was trying to do is they're trying to get the United States involved in the war, because if they can get the United States involved in the war, USA. Wake up, America, civilization calls. Every man, woman, and child, come to the defense. There is still a place in the line for you. This space is reserved for a fit man, a fit man, will you fill it? Are you a man? Can you fill that spot? Men of Britain, will you stand for this? 78 women and children were killed, and 228 women and children were wounded by the German raiders. You need to come join the army right now. So those are some British posters. And the United States, towards the end of the war, we're not in it yet, but we're about to be, and we decided we're going to make some posters ourselves. Have you seen that one? Have you seen that one? There you go. It's a World War I poster. I want you for the U.S. Army. Uncle Sam looking right at you, boring his little eyes right into your soul. And I like the next one here. This is also a very popular one. So you've got this girl, and she's dressed in a Navy uniform. And here's the deal. U.S. Army or U.S. Navy, no women are allowed. You can't have women in the military yet. You can't have women in the military, so she's basically playing dress up. And so she's wearing a Navy uniform, and she says, "Gee, I wish I were a man. I'd join the Navy. Gee, I wish I were a man. I'd join the Navy." And then the tagline at the bottom says, "Be a man and do it. Be a man and do it. United States Navy recruiting station." So obviously, what emotion does that pull on us guys? Well, hot girl, and I you know what? I'm a man. That's what they're doing. Okay, 2.5 examples here. What emotions are being preyed on here? In the far left. Even a dog enlists. Why not you? What emotion does that pull, right? The dog is signing up. Here's the next one. Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? Ooh, that one's a good one, right? Because if your answer is, I sat around, did nothing. Well, that's pretty awkward. Oh, I went out and I did, I was, right. And then, not a World War I poster, don't get this confused. This is actually from a video game. Can you name the video game? Can you name the video game? Soldiers eat babies. That's a fact. And I put that on here because, one, soldiers don't eat babies. But notice he's German. It's a German outfit. So, propaganda. Do you know the video game? On the home front, as millions of men, and we're not talking about just the United States here, but we're talking about in France, we're talking about England, we're talking about Germany. Millions of men are out there in the trenches, like literally in the trenches, and are out there on the front lines. The women are going to step up. And so, up to this point in world history, there's the men who are doing the hunting and killing, and the women who are doing the gardening and the sewing and the cooking and the cleaning. And that was just kind of the spheres that men and women are doing. We've talked about this in world history. We've talked about this. And here in World War I, the women are going to say, wait, we can help by doing. And they started jumping into these factory jobs, building the weapons and army or the tanks. World War I was the first war that had tanks, not what you're really thinking. And the first war with airplanes, not really what you're thinking. But the women are building these things. The women are building these things. And this is going to revamp, this is going to change everybody's ideas about women, what women can and cannot do. And so, in fact, because of this war, women are going to get suffrage. They're going to be able to vote in some of these countries, either during or after this war. In the United States of America, President Wilson was so impressed with how the women jumped into the factories and helped out the war cause. He was like, okay, yeah. Why are we not letting you vote? You guys totally need to vote. You gals totally need to vote. And so then he pushed for the 19th Amendment. which was then signed in 1920, just after the war. Okay. Again, World War, not just Europe, World War. And so we're going to have fighting down in Africa, we're going to have fighting over in Europe, or certainly in Europe, we're going to have fighting in Asia, and because of all the different colonies. And so we have, except for Austria-Hungary doesn't have any colonies, but everybody else has colonies. Germany has colonies, the Ottoman Empire has colonies, Britain and France and Russia, well, Russia, I don't like Russia. But everybody has colonies, and so all the colonies are going to fight each other, and or the colonies are going to supply troops and or munitions and or. So, Japan's going to ally with Britain, and they're going to start grabbing some German territories, which is kind of interesting 20 years later. And so Japan's going to get in towards the end. Okay. We're going to be done here in about 7 or 8 minutes. 9 or 10 minutes. The Ottoman Empire, they look at Russia, and you think about where the Ottoman Empire is, they're south of Russia, Turkey is south of Russia. So they think, well, while Germany's going to come this way against Russia, the Ottoman Empire is going to go this way against Russia, and they're going to hit Russia from 2 sides. And to do that, the young Turks are going to go north into Armenia, up into Russia. Now, Armenia is a Christian nation. It's a Russian Orthodox. And the Turks, being Islamic, as they come through, they're going to kill a lot of Armenians. In fact, we call this a genocide. In fact, I say that, the word genocide comes from this particular situation, this horrible, awful, evil situation. 1.5 million Armenians are killed by the Turks because of their ethnic background and or religious background. They're killed, and we're not talking about just soldier-age men. We're talking about women, children, old people, orphans, people in the hospitals, clergymen. We're talking about everybody. And so the Ottoman Empire, when they swept through, it was awful. In fact, this was the world's biggest genocide, except for the Holocaust during World War II. And yeah, we got pictures. The one with the people lining up there, but down low, all the different skulls, the skulls of all the dead, some dead. We have the women who are being crucified. We have the gentlemen who are being hanged. We have the survivors who apparently have not eaten in a long time. Yeah, genocide is awful. Okay. On a more positive note, the United States, we're going to get involved. We're going to get involved. We're going to get involved for a couple of reasons, and in American history we're going to talk about it more. We've got the Zimmerman Note, we've got the Lusitania, we've got all sorts of things going on, but the short version is we're going to get involved, even though President Wilson tried to keep us out, but we're going to. And so, from the world perspective, the United States, we're finally going to put on our big boy britches, and once we do, we're coming. And so we're going to go from a debtor nation to a creditor nation. We're going to start giving money to these nations to help them defeat Germany. We're going to do all sorts of crazy stuff, and we're going to start ramping up our industrial complex. And Germany makes some very poor decisions about what they do with their submarines, which really gets us involved. Okay. So the Germans, and we're almost done here, so the Germans, they start looking at the news and they're like, oh no, the United States, they're coming. And so they also know that because the United States were on the other side, basically on the other side of the world, right across the Atlantic, it's going to take us a while to get ramped up. It's going to take us a while to build what we need to build. It's going to take us a while to get our troops over there. And so the Germans are like, we got to hit France. We got to knock them out. We got to knock them out right now, because we got to get France down. We got to knock down Britain right now, because if we wait and the United States gets here, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And so they try to get there, but the United States we're able to give enough money. We're able to put enough resources over there for France and Britain to hold out just a little bit longer, and then the United States shows up, and we're in two very, very small, I say small, thousands of people died, but small battles, and then Germany realizes it's the end, and so Germany's going to sign the armistice on November 11th. They sign it at 11 o'clock. And so we say the end of the war was at 11 o'clock on November 11th. So it's 11/11 at 11. So the world calls that Armistice Day. We call it Veterans Day, which is why that's the day that Germany put its guns down. And then they're going to sign a peace treaty. So how do we do that? So, yep, just like 2 more slides. So here are the big four. You've got David Lloyd George from England. You've got Vittorio Emanuele from from Italy, because he kind of snuck himself in there. You got Clemenceau from France, and then you've got Woodrow Wilson from the United States. And they're going to sit down and they're going to start hammering out the treaty. The four of them. Germany is not in the room to negotiate the treaty. Austria-Hungary, not in the room. Turkey, not in the room. They're not in the room when these guys start writing the treaty. China, not invited. Japan, not invited. Those four guys. There was a guy from Vietnam who gave a whole bunch of troops to France. His name is Ho Chi Minh. And he knocked on the door and he's like, hey guys, can I come in? And Woodrow Wilson said, you know what? You're a nobody. Go away. For those of you who know a little bit about world history, Woodrow Wilson told Ho Chi Minh he was a nobody and to go away. I wonder what Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam is going to do later. The short version here is that the treaty, Woodrow Wilson had basically tried to write 14 points, and he said, here's what we should do, and the other three guys were like, we don't like any of that. Well, we like some of it, we don't really like a lot of it. And Woodrow Wilson says, fine, here's what I really want. I really want a League of Nations. Today we call it the United Nations. We really want a League of Nations where we can all get together, and we can all hold hands, and we can all sing Kumbaya, and we can all work out our treaty. We can all work out our issues by talking. And the other guys are like, no, we're going to make Germany pay. We're going to make Germany pay. So Austria-Hungary is broken up into several different countries. Ottoman Empire basically goes bye-bye, and Germany loses some of its land. Germany has to pay for what's going on. And it was so, there's our new map, lots of different countries that didn't exist. It was so harsh on Germany when they were told, okay, come on in and sign it. The German diplomat who walked in, he goes, okay, let me read it. And they said, no, you don't even get to read it. You have to sign it before you read it. And when the German signed it and he read it, he's like, oh, what? We just gave away all of it? What? I'm like, uh-huh. The treaty was so harsh that when the Germans found out about it, there were a lot of upset people. And this brand new party, this brand new political party called the Nazi Party started to the Russians didn't get involved in the treaty. The Chinese were left out. Ho Chi Minh, I talked about that. All right. And then in a turn of irony, hey, you know what? This is a great place to stop. So that's video 1. Video 2 is coming. The aftermath of World War I. See you guys on the flip side. Be good.